Welcome to Dialogue this week. In this corner, we invite guests from in and out of Korea to talk about a wide variety of issues ranging from culture and sports to the latest trends around the world. Today, we're going to talk about a very contentious issue on whether K-pop boy band BTS should be able to get an exemption from serving in the Korean military. Now, just last week, South Korean lawmakers were busy debating over whether BTS could be exempted from military service, as all able-bodied South Korean men must carry out compulsory military service for about 2 years. And under the current law, exemptions have only been given to international award-winning athletes and classical musicians for their roles in elevating the country's reputation abroad. The issue had been brought up as Jin, the oldest member of BTS, was born in December 1992 and would have had to enlist. But news came in that BTS has filed for a deferment of military enlistment thanks to the amendment to the Military Service Act. For outstanding persons in the field of pop culture and art, all BTS members have now applied to postpone their enlistment until the age of 30. So this means Jin can be active in BTS until his birthday in December 2022, allowing all members of the group to perform as a complete group until then. But this doesn't mean that the controversy is over, as the discussions are expected to resume again late next year. To delve deeper into the contentious issue, we're joined by Mason RICHEY, Associate Professor of International Politics at the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, and Professor Kim Young-jun from the Korean National Defense University, both via Skype. Good morning. Great to have you both on our show.
Happy to be here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, too. Now, let's begin with Professor Kim. Conscription in South Korea has been in place since 1957, meaning that once a male citizen turns 18 years old, his mandatory military service comes into effect. So to start with a little bit of background on the compulsory military service here in the nation, what is the status quo and what has changed since the military law came into effect 64 years ago?
We have some history about the background of conscription services. The first religion is the North Korea and the Korean War memory, because we have the North Korean invasion in 1950 and 1953, and then we have started the official conscription services in 1957. From there, all men are required to join the military and compulsory military services, and over 18 years old men have to join the military if they don't have any problems. So it is some history, and we have started some selective voluntary services in combining with the conscription services, so as a defense reform in early 2000.
Now, this all goes back to one of the primary reasons that we have a mandatory enlistment system in South Korea, which is that the Korean War only ended in an armistice in 1953. Now, Professor RICHEY, there have been recent talks of an end-of-war declaration between the two Koreas. If this were to actualize, could this bring changes to the current military draft?
Well, I think most experts don't really believe that in the short or the medium term, an end-of-war declaration will change the structural security situation on the Korean Peninsula. So in that regard, I don't think it will have much of an effect. The end-of-war declaration is seen more as a stepping stone or a beginning of a process that could lead to reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. And that, of course, might change the way that the compulsory military service is viewed here. However, that reconciliation, by any reasonable estimation, is something that really will be long-term. And really, in the interim period, in the intervening period, South Korea's demographic problem will continue to get worse. And in fact, that's going to be the driving factor, I think, for how the military service fills its ranks and how it evolves going forward. I don't think that the end-of-war declaration itself will really have much of an effect.
So demographics could be a bigger factor in bringing effect to the military situation now. And Professor Kim, objection to military service in South Korea is punishable with up to 3 years in prison. How much flexibility does the Korean Military Service Act give towards a valid reason that these objectors propose, like, for instance, health issues and accomplishments?
Yeah, we have some ejection region, definitely a valid reason for the ejection from the military service, just another country who has a conscription. For example, physical or health problem, inedible person, for example, the man who under the 145 centimeter the height, or if they were in prison in more than 6 years, or some family background, a very poor, extremely poor family background for religion, or the other. We just started conscious objector some years ago. The Korean Supreme Court allowed their conscientious objector for the educational service religion. It is a controversial, and we have also sports and artistic professional, for example, Olympic medalist, the bronze in Olympic game, or golden medalist in Asian game, and also some artistic person who got the world level region, or some scientists as well. They're working for the industry rather than, but we don't have any kind of standard for popular singer or the movie actor, so now it's became the controversy.
Now, like you've just said, the Military Service Act does exempt individuals under certain circumstances from mandatory service. Most commonly, those that are exempt don't meet the draft physical examination requirements, like you just mentioned, and the current law excuses Olympic and Asian Games medalists, as well as classical musicians who win awards in international or national contests. Professor RICHEY, what is your stance on the terms of exemption?
Exemptions for compulsory military service like this are sort of inherently arbitrary and inherently absurd. Why classical musicians and not BTS? Why Olympic winners and not race car drivers or opera singers? This is totally arbitrary and totally absurd. Which is why, really, to be fair, the only way to handle the situation is to not have any merit-based exemptions at all. But of course, that also leads to absurd outcomes, where talents in the prime of their life that are important for Korea's soft power and are therefore also doing a nationally meritorious service are forced to go into the military at a time, when they could, in some respects, be doing more good for the country by continuing to push forward the accomplishments in their area of talent. So, of course, really the best way to handle this is to simply not have a conscripted military service. But of course, given the situation on the Korean Peninsula, that's not really possible either. It's a sort of one more tragedy that comes out of the war and the fact that the war hasn't been ended here. As I mentioned earlier, the real issue I think going forward is going to be the fact that there's a demographic crunch coming anyway. And the military here is going to have to move towards more automation, towards more robotics, and towards trying to do more in terms of national defense with less personnel. The discussions about the exemptions are to some degree an inherent sideshow to which there's not really a good answer.
But what about you, Professor Kim? What is your stance on the overall premise of military service exemption, and why do we have lawmakers pushing for amendments to the law?
Yes, now the National Assembly consider about the amendment to the law, especially by the Judicial Committee and Defense Committee as well, because of BTS issue and change of international and domestic environments, and also in coming presidential election, definitely. So now it's the data supported exemption from the military service for BTS, 58% support and 31% opposite. And at the personal level, it's a good idea to include the BTS for the military exemption. But at the same time, what is standard? I support the the pianist or Olympic medalist is not much better than the popular singer, but at the same time, what is standard? Maybe Billboard Awards or American Music Award, or how about the Grammy Awards or other international awards, or how about Dongbang Shingi or Super Junior, the other star? What is the standard? Who is better? Who is less? How about the popular in domestic, not famous in international countries? So it is very difficult to make the standard. That's why it's a controversy. So also at the same time, more importantly, now we don't have enough men for the military service. Now is we have the 600,000, but in 10 years, in 20 years, we much don't have the enough men man capability for military service. We will have only 300,000 or 200,000 in 10 years. So we need to consider about the military power as well.
Mm-hmm. We'll have to consider both sides of the argument. Well, now the hot potato in terms of military service exemption last month, a fresh bill proposing military exemptions for K-pop artists reignited controversy, and of course the attention is focused on BTS. It was just a year ago when South Korea's parliament passed a bill allowing K-pop stars to defer their service until the age of 30 under the recommendation of the culture minister. Now, with their oldest member, Jin, who's turning 30 next year, the debate has returned. So, Professor RICHEY, do you believe that BTS meets the requirements for military service exemption?
Well, you know, if classical musicians and Olympic gold medalists meet the requirements, then I don't see why BTS doesn't meet the requirements. They've won international awards. They've, you know, topped the Billboard charts. You know, their videos have been, you know, #1 hits on YouTube. You know, they've been special ambassadors at the United Nations. You know, arguably, you know, over the last 5 to 10 years, and possibly even earlier than that, you know, no group has had, or you know, no, you know, cultural export product from South Korea has had such an impact on South Korea's soft power. So yes, but the whole point, as Professor Kim just mentioned, is that these requirements are arbitrary and kind of absurd. You know, you could make cases for, you know, dozens of other, you know, groups or cultural exports from South Korea that would also fit whatever the quote unquote requirements are.
So, Professor Kim, do you agree? What about you? Do you feel that the BTS should be exempted as well?
As a single case, I support BTS definitely to the exempt from the military service. But more overall, this is an issue about the also military defense reform as well, because it is the time to stop all exemption from military service because of lack of men people, not to expand exemption. We need to consider about the defense fields as well, not just who is better to avoid the military service exemption or not, because we have a strong challenge about the defense reform and lack of manpower for the military service. And we just not have about the North Korean threat, but also at the same time, China, Japan, and Russia have a more stronger military capability, including hypersonic or something like that. So it's time to stop all exemption, not to expand the exemption military service now.
Professor Kim, even those that take the stance against BTS being exempt from military service feel less strongly against them partaking in an alternative program. What alternative do you think should or could be put in place, and should such an alternative program be available not only to K-pop artists but those under other exceptional circumstances too?
Absolutely, that's a wonderful idea. I think it's we already have a similar program for the alternative service, just like the Olympic medalist or soccer player. For example, we have the we call the Sangmu team. It's about the military servicemen who former the player and sports professional, and also artists as well. So maybe we can open more flexibility for this kind of alternate service also to BTS as well. But I support the personal level at the BTS military exemption, but we need to have a standard. Otherwise, after BTS, every time, every movie actor or original game with the other movie hit in the global level, we need to consider about case by case and controversial in society. So we need to make some standard, and alternative services are a very good idea, I think.
So coming up with a standard is all the more important in this issue. Well, before we let you go, Professor Richey, what other countries require mandatory military service, and what kinds of exemptions have they implemented for their pop culture artists?
Yeah, there are actually quite a number of countries. I think probably most famously, people think of Israel, which has a quite extensive military service. Turkey, Finland, Switzerland, Russia, a number of countries in Africa. I don't know exactly how many there are, but probably more than one think. The details of that compulsory military service in those cases are very different. In some cases, it's relatively short. In Korea, it's relatively long. I believe anywhere between 18 and 22 or 24 months. In some countries, it's shorter. In some countries, it's longer. Obviously, in North Korea, which is famous for this, it's extremely long. Some countries also have not only males but also females that are conscripted. As for exemptions, there are lots of different reasons why different countries allow exemptions in different ways. There are some countries where they can be purchased or also reductions in military time. For instance, Turkey, you can purchase reductions in the time, or in some cases even more or less a complete exemption. There are some countries that make exemptions for single parents, for instance, single fathers. There are countries that make exemptions for your status abroad, if you're a national who's been living abroad. And then a number of countries, for instance, Russia, allow national decrees or people that are, according to various legal processes, considered to be people of national merit. Can also get exemptions. So, most systems do have some form of exemption, but they're all in some respects more or less arbitrary.
All right. Well, I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up at this point. Thank you so much, Professor Kim and Richey, for your thoughts on this contentious issue. We appreciate your time and contribution to our show.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.